Do one of those. Oh, she's getting ready. Just a minute. She's getting ready for overtime. Speaking of getting ready, hey family, good to see you for branching overtime on a Monday.
What's up?
In case you were
Here
wondering,
Here we go.
Janelle's got her sugar dispenser all ready for her coffee.
That's right. That's why I'm on time. All month.
It might be enough for the week. We'll see if we have enough. It looks so awesome when she dispenses this into her coffee.
That's a lie. Wow, Brian.
You dispense from this.
Yeah, I do.
She opens it and pours it.
It's not a lot, though.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a whole container of sugar. That's fine. Okay. We're going to get to today's topic here in just a second. Hope you're all doing well in quarantine or social distancing or whatever you're doing. It's going to be weird today with all the lines at the grocery stores.
Everywhere in the state of Ohio. That's crazy. Because it was cute when it was like, oh, so-and-so's doing it. Or now everybody has to do it.
I'm not looking forward to it.
So who's going to go grocery shopping now?
Me.
That's good.
I
That's
grocery
so
shop.
Gentlemanly of you.
Well, you seem surprised.
It wasn't like that before, like recently.
Why do you keep saying that? Live in the now. Yesterday, not only did I go grocery shopping, I made dinner and cleaned it up.
So how long have you been married?
A long time.
Wow, Brian. I hope Sarah's not here. That should be like a normal thing that you shouldn't even have to say. That's like me saying, I watched my kids yesterday. They're all still living.
What do you mean by
They
watch
ate.
your kids?
Brian, you're supposed to be doing grocery shopping. Mike, what's up? Callie, Robert, he says, you guys are late. Oh, that's probably Brian's fault.
You're late, Rob.
Deborah wants to know, what did she miss about grocery shopping? Can we just update them?
Oh, yeah. So starting today, grocery stores and other retailers have to have limits on how many people can be in the store at the same time. So they're going to probably have lines outside of them, people waiting to get in.
Jennifer says Costco delivery. What is up with delivery, though? It's like 3 days from today. Or like...
She's hungry right now.
No, it's... it used to be like 2 hours. That's
Well, they're
really
busy.
annoying.
I went grocery shopping. My kids pretty much ate all the chips like the first day. All of them.
Yeah.
They wait till Sarah and I go to bed, and then they eat all the snacks.
Then they leave the bags out, I bet.
Oh, and
Empty.
the dishes. I found an empty bag of Doritos in the cabinet. I opened the cabinet, there's like, oh, Doritos. Oh, nope, it's empty, and you
my
put it
God.
back.
And nobody did it. Because you never find that.
I didn't even ask anymore, because I
Yeah.
know they're not going to tell me, oh, I didn't do that, it's not mine. So we got to talk about this issue, because we didn't like the headline at first. Social distancing is a privilege. Excuse me, this is an inconvenience, sir. New York Times editorial, he says in here, staying at home is a privilege. Social distancing is a privilege. So he goes on to indicate people like to say that the coronavirus is no respecter of race, class, or country, that the disease COVID-19 is mindless and will infect anybody it can. In theory, that's true, but in practice, in the real world, this virus behaves like others, screeching like a heat-seeking missile toward the most vulnerable in society. And this happens not because it prefers them, but because they are more exposed, more fragile, and more ill. And we dispense this callous message that the best defense we have against the disease is something that each of us can control. We can all just stay home and keep our social distance. But the reality is, as a report from the Economic Policy Institute pointed out, when it comes to the highest quartile of earners, 61.5% of people are able to stay home. They can do that. Of course they can with their kind of work. But when you look at the lowest quartile of those money earners in the workforce, only 9%, 9.2% in that lowest quartile can actually telework. Their jobs are not jobs you can do from home.
Yeah.
The vast majority have to be on site to earn a paycheck. So the people who can't, stay home have to make terrible choices. They stay at home and risk starvation, or go to work and risk contagion. It's not just happening here, it's happening all across the world. If they can go to work, they must use overcrowded mass transportation because low-wage workers can't necessarily afford to own a car or call a cab. And such is life for the working poor, or those slightly above poverty, but still struggling. Our entire discussion around this virus is stained with economic elitism.
No, whatever.
She didn't see me pointing.
All of us in this context.
I saw that.
So eye-opening.
But I saw that. I was like, excuse me, I am not economically elite,
Thank
sir.
you. Do I look like Jeff Bezos? That's what I was thinking. Like,
Yeah,
that's
me.
elite.
He's elite. No, but he went on to qualify this. He said, and this gets to the core of, I think, biblical thinking for Christians, where, remember, Jesus reminds us, I said this on the air, that it's not just murder that's sinful. It's hating your brother in your heart is tantamount to murder. We're all sinners that fall short of the glory of God in our thought, words, and deeds. And so you are an economic elite if you can afford to social distance and stay home.
Especially now.
Because it's, he says here, in social media commentary about images of packed buses or crowds of delivery workers outside restaurants, people chastise those people. Like, why aren't they following all the rules? Look at those people congregating or taking the bus. You're not supposed to take the bus. They don't have a choice.
Oh, man.
They don't have a choice. Now, there's another aspect to this that we'll get to in a minute, but let's just sit on that for a moment. I'm guilty of this.
Jennifer Morocco, you're my girl. You are so smart. She says, yes, this is why Detroit is getting hit so hard.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are missing it. Even the article says we're not talking about it, not realizing. Even Louisiana is another example. I knew Louisiana was getting hit hard. I never made the connection.
In high poverty rates?
Yeah.
I would have, yeah. I can't say for certain because I haven't seen the stats, but I'd imagine areas with high poverty rates are going to have a lot higher death rates and higher infection rates.
Or even what you said, which is another, you didn't bring it up on air, but driving past bus stations. I would have felt that too. Like, what are we doing?
I'm sure I've said it.
Yeah.
I've seen people, look at those people not paying attention.
That's messed up.
They got to wait for the bus, they got to take
and
the bus, they got
to
to
work. Oh, that's messed up.
I'm over here trying to get into the pizza place like this. You probably do it. Open it with my sleeves. I don't touch it. I'm walking in there
yes.
Thank you for my pizza. Not thinking about the fact that all these people are going to be exposed to this virus all the time because they don't have the privilege of making pizza from home for me. They can't do that.
You can't. And like you said, it's either choose their job and getting exposed or losing their job and starvation and what that presents.
I've been trying to tell her she's elite all the time and she never believes me. Now she knows. Aren't you?
God.
You're elite, aren't you?
I am not elite. Tara says, that is a good, honest perspective.
Yeah.
It's honest, but am I wrong to say some of us, before this, it wasn't that we weren't being honest? Is it naive to be like, we didn't know?
No.
Which is so messed up.
It is naivete. It is... We all get caught in our own world enough that we don't understand that we don't have this, that we have different choices than people in different positions. And so, in a sense, it is a privilege that Sarah can work from home and I can be in a small group and we just go back and forth to work.
And keep your job and be safe.
When there's people who literally are saying, I don't have a choice, I got to work, I got to make money.
And... not to overcomplicate the thing, but while we're complaining about working from home and dealing with the kids, these are people that are like, what are they doing with their children? Like the kids, everybody's kids is home. So they don't get to say, listen, I got a job, they got to still be at the school. And the complications that brings, forget dealing with your kid at the house. It's struggling with, who am I going to leave my child with in the middle of social distancing? Mike says,
Mike's replying to David.
Oh, okay. Callie says, I have been told not to use your sleeves to open things because you now could have brought home the chance of the disease. He doesn't think that far.
And she doesn't think. So at least I'm thinking.
What? Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know, Callie. I'm just trying to do my best.
I feel you. I would do the same thing because it's scary to touch it, bare hands.
And yet there's these dudes in there making my pizza. Great guys, they do a good job. Love you guys if you make my pizza and you're watching. Should we go to the other part yet or not?
Why are they encouraging everyone to wear masks? Yes, let's go to the other part.
So you thought that was uncomfortable. Let's go to a whole new area because remember, as believers, we are pro-life. We believe that all human life is created in the image of God and therefore all of it has value and all of it is worth protecting. Whether it is the unborn child, the disabled person, in these circumstances, the poor person. But being pro-life is complicated, I think, in some respects, because sometimes statistics are uncomfortable and they cause us to think about it in terms of socioeconomics and things like that. So check this out. All right, early evidence from cities and states already shows that who is affected disproportionately by the virus? Black people. And in devastating ways. As ProPublica reported in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, as of Friday morning, 81% of the deaths were black people from COVID-19. And black people only make up 26% of the county. 26% of the county, 81% of the deaths. In Chicago, WBEZ reported on Sunday that 70% of COVID-19 deaths in Chicago are black. And they pointed out that surrounding Cook County, which is where Chicago is located, but it's wider than just Chicago, while black residents make up only 23% of the population in that county, they account for 58% of COVID-19 deaths. Detroit News reported last week that 40% of those killed by the novel coronavirus in Michigan so far are black, a percentage that far exceeds the proportion of African Americans in Detroit and the region or state. If this pattern holds true across other states and cities, this virus could have catastrophic impact on black people in this country. That is uncomfortable. So I'm going to just set that right. Here's the table. I'm just going to set, it's not a table. This is the table. I don't know why I had to make this the table. It's paper. Set that right here. How do you react to that? How do you react to that?
Yeah. Wow. Sarah from Ecuador says, so here in South America, in some places, this is being considered a rich person's illness because the rich could travel and bring it back to their countries.
Oh, interesting. And yet the poor are more vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are they more vulnerable?
I think it's because they have fewer choices. They don't have the privilege to stay home.
You think it's just,
Self-quarantine.
well, yeah. I thought that, but I thought, because that would explain, okay, they're getting it more. They're
Right.
dying more, which actually is reflecting the health disparities, what's made certain groups way more vulnerable to being wiped out by a pandemic than others. You see what I'm saying? Because if you get it and survive, that's good. It's more than that. The vast majority of them are dying from it.
Yeah? So how do you react to all this?
Tara says she has heard that.
Well, she's
replying to Sarah. Oh, yeah. I guess my thing is more thinking, what's going to happen? What's this going to look like 10 years from now? How much is it going to set back certain communities on many levels?
Yeah, but and to me, this is the uncomfortable nature of discussions about statistics like this, where, again, the staggering one is Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. 26% of the population of the county is black. 81% of the deaths are black. Now, we know that the virus does not discriminate. That's not a racist virus. Like, your darker skin, my lighter skin, does not make you more vulnerable just because of the pigmentation of our skin.
Right.
So there has to be something else underneath that's making the death rate much higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doesn't that compel us as followers of Jesus, if we're supposed to protect the vulnerable, to figure out why? As uncomfortable as that might be.
This is interesting. Samantha, good morning. Wait, hold up, because she looks like she's in charge of
She's
something.
about to start Facebook stalking.
Look,
again.
doesn't she look like she's in charge of something? I like your glasses
More
and
than
your
you.
profile picture.
She got 4 names. She's in charge of something.
Yeah, I like your name too, Samantha. Samantha says, and here in America, we're saying the best way to find out if you have the disease is to sneeze on a rich person because they're more likely to have access to tests.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
But don't do that, obviously. But I get where that's coming from, right? Because you're watching all these Hollywood elites getting tested. I got an African-American pastor friend in Chicago that he's been in isolation in his own house from his family because they can't... He's in a category where he's not high risk per se, so they won't test him because there aren't enough tests to go around. So he thinks he's got it, but he doesn't know. And Hollywood elites get tested, please.
That's crazy. And so, yeah, Jennifer says the virus is most deadly in pre-existing conditions, health conditions. Some groups are more susceptible to hypertension and that is the most deadly.
Yes.
Christy says she's not surprised by the disparity, parallels other health disparities. Callie heard that people who are overweight have higher chances of getting this also. Bruce says, Brian, I'm very uncomfortable with this information that you're given, and I don't think you should have given that information because I'm not sure if that's the truth. I really don't. It's information that makes black people look weak and bad.
I don't agree with you on how that makes black people look at all. I'm sorry to say you're uncomfortable with that. It's verifiable information, factual, that I think is true, and I'm uncomfortable with it because I think it's data that we can't ignore. I'm assuming it's true, and if it is, that's a problem.
And what happens if we don't? Should we care? Is it just a talking point? You see what I'm saying? Is there a cost to not looking at those, to just saying, oh, whatever, it's a big deal. They're making a big deal.
Yeah.
Jennifer says, are the disproportionate numbers a result of the disproportionate number of minorities in poverty, or the fact that minorities are less likely to go to the doctor to treat underlying health conditions because of a lack of trust in the medical community, or the higher rate of heart disease?
Jennifer Jones, that's exactly the questions I'm asking in my head. You could go as far back as the Tuskegee syphilis studies, where African Americans in a certain community were tricked and to become test subjects of a syphilis study, and that has caused over long-term distrust of medical professionals in the black community. I think if you're looking at higher rates of poverty and disease, that would obviously then correlate to a more vulnerable population. But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it shouldn't be talked about.
Hello, yeah. Mike says if it's an accurate piece of data, it could help health researchers find the cure quicker. Would you agree that it could maybe help us, if you know one group is more susceptible, getting tests or test sites there quicker and more available? Or
I don't know if people want to do that, but I really think the uncomfortable reality is worth talking about, because if it's true, and I'm a Christian and I want to defend the oppressed and speak up for those who are vulnerable, if that's the case, then I want to say it so that people can become more aware. We can try to examine the causes of this, and maybe this is the beginning of talking about long-term societal change necessary in order to prevent this from happening again, another pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, are you on, you're a person of color, are you upset that I wanted to talk about it?
No, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it because I think it highlights disparities within the health system, vulnerabilities that the poor communities have, that, like you said, need to be addressed so that in the future they're not made more vulnerable than others. I mean, it's an issue that has to be discussed in terms of even just the healthcare system, but also just to talk about it in a holistic way, the impact that stresses and lifestyle and what they're exposed to in society, how it creates a lot of the health disparities, like hypertension and heart conditions. I mean, I don't want to go there, but there's a lot of that, you know.
And I'm saying if we look at, I agree with you 100%. And if we keep those statistics in the forefront of our mind and we're willing to bravely look at scary statistics and uncomfortable statistics, it will compel us to try to find realistic, compassionate answers.
Yes. An
because
example.
We shouldn't allow it.
The kind of food that's available in certain neighborhoods that are not available in others creates this. So we may not be able to solve this, but I think if we use this to say, dude, like, this is what we're creating, it could help us avoid issues in the future. Somebody just shared something that I wanted to read to you. Jennifer says you can go back further than the Tuskegee Project.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, there's a despicable thing of OBGYNs. Some of the current technology and current understanding was developed by a guy who experimented, and I'm going to leave it this generic, on enslaved people and African American people after they were enslaved and set free during the Jim Crow era without anesthesia.
Oh my goodness.
Because racist ideology was under the impression that black people felt less pain. And so you hear these stories and you understand why there's distrust of,
Yeah.
of medicine.
Yeah. Sarah says, sadly, that is true. Here, it is common for the upper class to have maids and house help. Those people get sick and then take it back home. Those people live in very close quarters and have little education about prevention in general, much less now when there's so much misinformation. Sadly, Ecuador has not fared well.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah, but I wish I could tell you I'm surprised. It's primarily, and you and I talked about this earlier, there's likely more of an impact on the economic disparity than there
Yes.
is just generically speaking, all things being equal when it comes to race. It's
Yeah.
likely an issue of economics.
And it just so happens that in the United States especially, economics kind of almost falls in line with race overall compared to...
There's higher rates of poverty in
Yes.
minority communities. But then, see, if you're the thinking person, you have to go, okay, well, why? Either people are genetically predisposed to poverty, which I don't believe to be true, or there's social conditions over time that have created conditions in which our modern society has higher rates of poverty among minority communities.
Yeah. But I think that's why these conversations are frustrating for some people, because you can't really talk about them honestly without acknowledging the connection to the past, whether we want to or not.
Whether we
You
want to or
have
not,
to.
there's nothing we can do
It's
about
not isolated. And we want to isolate it because it's uncomfortable. We want to say, those things are in the past, but they're connected to what it's created. Christy says, and those disparities are increased in areas of poverty. If they are, then the answer is multi-layered.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what...
No, I agree. I think it is multi-layered, and in this case, likely the wider and more impactful issue is poverty and its impact on people now.
Eva says, I think it's information that we need to hear because in the beginning, people were spreading the opposite information, that black people were immune to it, and a lot of people were believing that. This may be what put a lot of us at risk. No one is invincible. I actually heard that rumor going around, and Idris Alba, is that his name? He had to address some of it too. I don't know how they got started, or it's a virus. Like, I don't know who started
There's
that.
so much misinformation spreading around.
Yeah.
But it's almost depressing to look at the layers of truth in this. Like, so you go, okay, it's higher rates among African Americans of death from COVID. Okay, is that primarily an economic issue? If it's an economic issue, why is it an economic issue? Well, when people are poorer, they have less access to good diets, less education to understand proper diet. Therefore, they have higher rates of health issues, which if they have higher rates of hypertension and diabetes and things like that, they suddenly become more vulnerable to COVID-19.
Yeah.
So is that the issue? But then why do they have higher rates of unhealthiness, and what can we do about that as a society? That's where we really have to sit, is that deeper layer of, in the future, how can we make changes to be sure that just being poor doesn't make you more vulnerable?
Yes. Mike says certain ethnic groups eat different types of food also, which may add to susceptibility.
Perhaps.
And then Jennifer responded and said, yes, and some of those food choices are made because of what has been and currently is available to them in their communities. Isn't there a story behind, and I didn't ask you, okay, behind chitlins in communities? You brought it up. Like now we're like, oh, like we don't eat chitlins, but I know African Americans do more. And I think you had told me it's what was made available to them before.
Yeah, I actually, I had a neighbor across the street,
That's what it was,
an African American woman in her 60s, and when she was a child, her dad and her uncle and her would go get in the car, and Chicago was a major meatpacking place. And you could pull up to the meatpacking houses, and they would just give away the parts they would toss out.
Yes.
They'd toss out the feet, the turkey necks, they'd toss out the intestines. And when you're poor, you'll take what you can get. And people innovated ways to use those parts that nobody else wanted. But over time, they started charging for it when they realized what people were doing with it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, some of those traditions were developed out of poverty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I got some of that in my family. One of my favorite dishes is so weird. It's hot chocolate with crackers. and I think it's like awesome. It brings good memories. But when I talk to the adults in my family, older people, they're like, we just didn't have, like, they would give it to the little kids, and the older kids would eat a fuller meal, and it's because of finances. I thought like, oh, that's cool. We got chocolate and crackers. I know that sounds messed up, but it's in Dominican Republic when we would visit, it was a reality. Bruce says, Brian, it feels that this is intentional, then say it. Everything in writing is not true. Black are very strong people. We have survived a lot, and we're still here. I just don't like that blacks are portrayed as victims.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Bruce, and I feel like I hope you stick with us, buddy, because I think if you get to know my heart and Janelle's heart over time, maybe you're new to us, you'll understand that we, because of our love for Jesus, we believe that silly song, the idea that red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in His sight.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds cheesy, but in Christ there's no Jew nor Greek, no male nor female. We're all one in Christ Jesus. And I also think that because of that, when there are disparities and people are treated differently because of their ethnicity, I think it's our obligation as Christians to speak up and do something and defend the oppressed and deal with those issues. So we're passionate about this, and I agree with you. I mean, I don't even have to go into some of the details, but I am certainly not saying that being black makes you more vulnerable. What I'm saying is that, because that's not true, but what I'm telling you is that statistically speaking, what we're finding is that in certain areas, we're having a really high mortality rate from COVID-19 among African Americans.
And what's so sad about poverty and all this, which is where my heart is, but I can't make sense of it because it's happening now. But these are the things that set people apart. We've talked about the impact on education in certain socioeconomic groups compared to others with what's going on now. Like 10 years from now, what this is creating are going to be things that if you're not careful, you're going to be like, I don't understand all these single parent homes and why are the kids so much behind in certain neighborhoods. And we don't realize like these moments set people apart, like set them back way more than others.
Yes.
I can't help but think of education. And it's like these are the kids that are going to graduate 10 years from now. And we're going to be looking at them wondering, why weren't they pairing? Oh!
They missed half a year of school.
Frustrating.
Yeah, and that's where, as Christians, I don't think we can stay on the surface and not go down deep. Because if we're called to love our neighbor, visit the sick, the prisoner, defend the oppressed, do all those things, we have to get into the uncomfortable mess of statistics that help show us where those people are.
Yeah. So Jennifer and Kathy are talking. And so Kathy is responding to Jennifer about the disparities in health. And she's saying, Jennifer, I worked in an inner city OB/GYN clinic. Most, if not all, appointments were not preventative. No yearly exams. I had to hunt people down to follow up on abnormal PAPs and even to keep prenatal appointments. Also, regarding nutrition, carbs are cheap.
Yeah, and somebody else made that point too. If you go up, Michaela, scroll up just a little bit down. You went past it already.
Oh, I did? I'm sorry.
Michaela.
Right, yeah. I think there is progress being made slowly but surely. Businesses do a lot of health and wealth programs, and being health conscious is becoming more popular. Though you're right, Brian, the lower income families can't afford the healthier options. It's stupid that food with less ingredients are more expensive.
Yeah, like healthy food is more expensive. You can get a bag of chips for less than $1.
Yeah.
But you can't get an apple.
Yeah.
You know, like a bag of apples.
Yes.
For less than like $3. So
even the way that markets are, correct me if I'm wrong, but markets are in certain neighborhoods, you can't go and get like 2 weeks worth of food. My point is in terms of the social distancing, you got to constantly go out to get, and then what's available isn't even, like what's available at like a Giant Eagle. Bruce says, I love this show and I know you guys mean well, and I think this show is a show that we can disagree as Christians with love and have no problem.
Yeah.
Robert says, Bruce, I've met and spent time with Brian. I hear your point, yet it's not applicable here, my man.
Yeah, no, Bruce, I love that you made those comments because conversations where everybody agrees are really boring.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're bringing this stuff up and it's given me an opportunity to clarify. But I agree. I don't want African Americans to be portrayed as victims all the time.
No.
That's certainly not the case. There's lots to celebrate in the African American community. But maybe we can agree on the fact that when you see that 81% of deaths in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, 70% of COVID-19 deaths in Chicago are among African Americans, that we've got an issue that needs to be brought up.
And if it's not, my concern was, man, it's acting like we don't care.
Yeah.
Like, it should alarm us, and it should be like, man, are we doing something for that group?
It's because I love black people that I want to bring that up, and I love Latino people or whatever, yeah.
Jennifer says, there is a history of African Americans not being taken seriously by doctors or treated poorly or subjected to cruel experiments. So the idea of going to the doctor, even for needed care, can be difficult. And again, it's like Christy had said earlier, it's complicated and layered. Angela says we have to address the biases then to start to understand and help. Thank you.
That's our point.
Which possibly would lead to change. That's what I'm saying. Especially concerns that affect the poor more. Those in power and in position of authority have, like, they don't, unless you push, they're not addressed, right? Because the poor don't have people in those positions of power. So for our friend who's concerned about us portraying African Americans as weak, that's not the point. It's trying to be what the Bible says. Speak for those who can't speak for themselves. You know, and it would alarm me. If I was in that community and 80% of us are dying, it would hurt me to be a Christian and hear our show and be like, so y'all don't, like, this doesn't...
You don't care? Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, so it's a really important thing to address. And again, poverty, it's brought up almost at uncomfortable levels in Scripture, how often the poor are addressed and our responsibility to care for them. And so in this case, clearly poverty is a contributing factor to death and such. So we got to be aware of these things.
Yeah.
We are out of time, family. Thanks for your discussion.
We love y'all.
Please be sure to share this discussion with your family and friends. It's uncomfortable, but maybe it's worth talking about. And as somebody pointed out, I think it was Angela pointed out, that the uncomfortable conversations, Lord willing, will lead us to Romans 12:2, letting God transform us into new people by changing the way we think.
Angela, yeah, you the girl.
And then be what James says, people who put action to our faith and move forward and make a difference. Thanks, everybody, for your comments. We got to run. We will see you later.
Mañana.